It was supposed to be just an ordinary afternoon at Rossetti's Bakery in South Boston. Children's laughter bounced around the room. The ovens hummed steadily. The warm scent of sugar drifted through the air. Then the door opened softly. Hesitant, a homeless woman stepped inside, her hand gripping the tiny hand of a little girl, worn-out sneakers on her feet, blonde hair tied back with a ribbon that had frayed and thinned with time. The mother's blue eyes looked tired, the kind of tired life carves into a person after years of straining just to survive. They stood in front of the glass display filled with fresh cakes, glossy icing, strawberries shining like small jewels, and candles waiting for birthday parties. The little girl whispered, "Mom, the pink one with butterflies is so pretty. Can I choose one?" The mother swallowed hard and forced a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice to the cashier with words only 3 people in the room could hear. "Ma'am, do you have any cake that's close to its expiration date? Just a small one. Today is my daughter's birthday." The cashier frowned. Behind them, a few customers let out mocking little laughs. But someone else heard it too. Sitting in a dark corner, holding a tiny cup of espresso between fingers marked with a compass tattoo, was Marcus Valenti, the most powerful mafia boss in Boston. He saw how the little girl tried to hide her disappointment. He saw the mother pretending not to notice the looks of contempt, and he heard every word, clearer than gunfire. The cashier let out an impatient sigh. "No, ma'am. We're a bakery, not a trash dump." The little girl lowered her head. The mother blinked fast, trying to hold back tears. The mafia boss rose slowly to his feet. A chair leg scraped against the floor. The whole bakery froze. He walked over, looming behind them, his tall shadow spilling across the cake case. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and even. The mother turned around, frightened. She recognized him instantly, that face she had seen on the news, the faint scar running from the corner of his eye down to his cheekbone. But instead of cruelty, there was something else in his gray eyes. He knelt down to the little girl's level, looked at her worn sneakers, at her trembling smile, and asked gently, "Tell me, sweetheart, which birthday cake do you want?" What happened next would change the lives of all 3 of them forever. Stay until the end of the story, because what the mafia boss does next will leave everyone with a lump in their throat. If you feel moved, please hit like to support the channel. Share this story with the people you love. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next heart-touching stories. Little Emma stared at the strange man with wide eyes, half frightened and half curious. Her tiny hand clutched the hem of her mother's coat as if it were the only life preserver in a sea of strangers. Scarlett wanted to pull her daughter away, wanted to run from this place, from everyone's stares, from the powerful man whose reputation she knew all too well. But her feet felt nailed to the floor. Marcus Valenti's voice was low and even, yet it wasn't frightening. It carried something Scarlett couldn't name, something almost gentle. Emma glanced up at her mother, then back at the man kneeling in front of her. Shyly, she lifted one small finger and pointed toward the glass case. "The pink one with the butterflies," she whispered, so softly it nearly dissolved into the air. "But I only want a small slice." Marcus followed the direction of Emma's finger. It was the biggest cake in the display, 3 tiers of pale pink frosting, delicate sugar butterflies perched on top as if they were about to lift off and fly. A cake meant for lavish birthday parties, for children who were cherished, for whole families, not for a 7-year-old girl living on the streets. He stood and turned toward the register. Brittany, the employee who had been sharp and bossy just moments ago, now stood trembling. Her face had gone pale, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as if she needed something to keep herself upright. She knew who Marcus Valenti was. Everyone in Boston did. "I want that cake," Marcus said, his voice neither raised nor softened, but carrying the weight of a command. "The biggest one, 3 tiers. And I want 7 pink candles placed on top." Brittany nodded over and over, not daring to meet his eyes. Yes, sir. Right away." Marcus wasn't finished. "Add a bag of food, 2 grilled chicken sandwiches, pumpkin soup, and those small pastries in that case. Everything that's freshest. Pack it carefully." Brittany threw herself into the work as if her life depended on it. Maybe it did. While she hurried and fumbled with the boxes and bags, Marcus took out his wallet. He laid 5 $100 bills on the counter, neatly arranged, unhurried. "Keep the change," he said. "Consider it a tip for your wonderful service." The sarcasm in his words made Brittany drop her gaze even lower, not daring to say a single thing. The whole bakery remained silent. The customers who had been sneering only moments earlier now stood like statues, eyes fixed on the floor, no one daring to breathe too loudly. Scarlett stood there, overwhelmed. She wanted to refuse, wanted to say they didn't need charity, that she still had her pride. But when she looked down at Emma's face, at the way her daughter's eyes were lighting up for the first time in months, at how she stared at that cake as if it were an entire dream, Scarlett couldn't open her mouth. Brittany brought out the cake, boxed with care, along with a large paper bag stuffed with food. She set everything on the counter, then stepped back, her head still bowed. Marcus picked up the cake box and turned to Scarlett and Emma. His gaze rested on the young mother's face, on her tired blue eyes, on the old clothes worn thin at the shoulders, on the gaunt look of someone who hadn't eaten a full meal in far too long. "Where are you two staying?" The question was simple, yet it froze Scarlett in place. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. Lying would be pointless. Staying silent would be too obvious. And her silence was the answer Marcus had already known before he asked. He looked at her, looked at Emma, then gave a small nod, as if confirming something in his own mind. "Come with me," he said. Not a command, not a request, just 3 simple words, carrying a promise Scarlett couldn't yet understand. And even though every survival instinct in her head was screaming, "Run, refuse, stay away from this man," another part of her, the part that was exhausted, desperate, worn down from carrying everything alone for far too long, whispered back, "What is there left to lose?" Scarlett looked at Marcus and waited. She had just told him everything. From the hopeful years when she worked as a nurse, to the massive debt Ryan had left behind, to 8 relentless months of homelessness. She had poured it all out, as if the words themselves were a weight she'd carried for too long and finally needed to set down. Now it was his turn. "Why did you do all of this? Why did you watch us for 3 weeks? Why would a man like you care about a homeless mother and child?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He sat across from her in the living room of the new apartment, his face half submerged in shadow. Emma was asleep in her own room, holding tight to the teddy bear Rosa had already placed on the bed. The apartment was so quiet Scarlett could hear the wall clock ticking. 12 years ago, Marcus finally spoke, his voice lower, rougher, as if every word had to push through an invisible wall in his throat. "I have a sister, Isabella." Scarlett stayed silent, sensing this wasn't the moment to question, only the moment to listen. Marcus stared out the window. Streetlight spilled in and traced the hard lines of his face, making the faint scar on his cheekbone look deeper. "Isabella was my only sister. She was nothing like me, kind, gentle. She believed in the good in the world. When I chose this path," he lifted one hand slightly, indicating everything he represented. "She didn't accept it. She wanted a normal life, far from me, far from the darkness I carried with me." He paused and took a deep breath. Isabella married a man she loved. They had a daughter, Sophia, but then her husband left when Sophia was only 2. Just like your Ryan, he vanished without a word, leaving his wife and child in ruins. Scarlett felt a chill travel up her spine. The resemblance was too obvious, too painful. "Isabella refused to take my money," Marcus went on. "She said she didn't want to be tied to blood-stained money. She carried everything herself. 3 jobs. Cashier during the day, cleaning offices in the afternoon, waiting tables at a bar at night, sleeping 3 or 4 hours a day. All of it just so Sophia would have food and clothes, so she could go to school like other children." Marcus's voice began to shake, something Scarlett never imagined she'd witness in a man like him. One night, Isabella was driving home after her 3rd shift. 2 in the morning. She was so tired, so exhausted she couldn't keep her eyes open. Her car hit the median on the highway. She died at the scene. Scarlett lifted a hand to cover her mouth, tears spilling out before she could stop them. She hadn't known Isabella, had never met that woman, but she understood. She understood the kind of exhaustion that makes your body feel like it might collapse. She understood sleepless nights of worry over a child. She understood the loneliness of a single mother with no one beside her. "Sophia, my niece, was 7 years old then," Marcus said, his voice tightening as if it were being strangled. "The same age Emma is now. After Isabella died, I tried to adopt Sophia. I wanted to make it right for her, for my sister, for all the years I wasn't there. But the court refused. My record," he let out a bitter, hollow laugh, "wasn't fit for raising a child. Sophia was sent into foster care. I tried everything, money, connections, everything I had. But they took her, moved her from one place to another, and in the end I lost track of her. The last time I saw Sophia was at her mother's funeral. She stood beside the casket, not crying, only staring. The eyes of a 7-year-old child shouldn't carry emptiness like that. Marcus turned back to Scarlett, and in his gray eyes she saw an abyss of grief that 12 years still hadn't filled. When I saw you and Emma in the bakery that day, he said slowly, I saw Isabella and Sophia. I saw my sister in the tiredness in your eyes. I saw my niece in Emma's smile. You asked what I want from you. I don't want anything. I just want history not to repeat itself. I couldn't save Isabella. I couldn't keep Sophia with me. But maybe I can save you too, Scarlett cried, not from pity for herself, but because for the first time she saw the real human being behind the mafia boss's cold exterior. A brother who had lost his sister, an uncle who had lost his niece, a man who had carried a scar inside his heart for 12 years, a scar no one could see, yet one that had never stopped hurting. She didn't speak. She simply reached out and took Marcus's hand, a hand that had done cruel things, but tonight was trembling like a lost child. That night, after Marcus left, Scarlett lay on a soft bed for the first time in 8 long months. She couldn't sleep, not because she was afraid or anxious, but because she still couldn't believe any of this was real. She stared up at the ceiling, listening to Emma's steady breathing in the next room, and tears kept slipping down onto the pillow. The next morning, the day's first sunlight pushed through the curtains and woke Emma. The little girl sat straight up, eyes wide, looking around the room as if she had to prove to herself she wasn't dreaming. The bed had pale pink sheets. A light wood bookshelf stood nearby with a few comic books already placed there. A soft brown teddy bear lay beside her pillow. And the window, a real window with curtains, with light, with even birdsong outside. Mom! Emma hopped out of bed and ran barefoot out of the room. Mom! Mom! Scarlett was in the kitchen, holding a white ceramic mug she'd found in the cabinet. She turned at the sound of her daughter's voice, and the sight in front of her made her heart seem to stop for a beat. Emma stood in the middle of the living room, her blue eyes shining, her face glowing with a joy Scarlett had thought she might never see again. Mom, is this our home? Really, Mom? I have my own room. I have a bed. I even have a teddy bear. Scarlett set the mug down and sank to her knees to wrap her arms around her. She couldn't speak. She just held Emma tightly and cried. She cried for the past 8 months, for all the time she'd forced herself to look strong in front of her child. She cried for the freezing nights on street corners when she'd had to pull Emma into her arms just to keep her warm. She cried for the meals she'd skipped so her daughter could have one more piece of bread. She cried because at last, her little girl had a roof over her head. Are you crying because you're happy, Mom? Emma asked, her voice innocent. She lifted her tiny hand and wiped the tears from her mother's cheeks. Yes, baby, Scarlett whispered, her voice thick. I'm crying because I'm happy. Emma smiled, and then she continued her tour of the apartment. She ran into the bathroom and squealed when she saw the bathtub with a shower head. She opened the refrigerator, her mouth falling open at the cartons of milk, the eggs, the fresh fruit. She stood at the living room window and looked down at the small park below, with rows of deep green trees. Mom, there's a park too. There are swings. Scarlett watched her from a distance, her heart both aching and warm, aching, because she realized the simplest things, a bed, a refrigerator full of food, a bathroom with hot water, could make her daughter this happy. That meant for 8 months, she hadn't been able to give Emma even the most basic things. But warm too, because now Emma had everything. At 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. Scarlett opened the door and saw Marcus standing there, holding a large paper bag. He wore a simple white shirt, no suit, none of the frightening presents he'd carried in the bakery. This morning he looked like an ordinary man, like a neighbor stopping by. I brought croissants for breakfast, he said. Rosa baked them early. Uncle Marcus. Emma ran out, no longer frightened the way she'd been the day before. Uncle, my room has a teddy bear. And books too. I love it. Marcus looked at the little girl, and Scarlett saw something in his eyes, a flicker of light, and yet pain too. She understood what he was seeing, who he was thinking of. Sophia, the 7-year-old niece he had lost, the child who would be 19 now, somewhere out there, and he didn't even know if she remembered anything about the uncle who had tried to save her. Marcus knelt and gently brushed his hand over Emma's blonde hair. I'm glad you like it, he said softly. This is your home now. You can stay as long as you want. Emma threw her arms around Marcus's neck, the natural gesture of a child who didn't know fear. And Scarlett saw the broad shoulders of the Mafia boss tremble slightly. She saw his gray eyes close. She saw him hold Emma as if he were holding 12 years of regret and a chance at redemption that life had just placed in his hands. That afternoon, the small apartment on Beacon Hill filled with the sweet scent of vanilla frosting and the clear, bright sound of laughter. Scarlett had spent the whole morning with Rosa, decorating the living room with pink and white balloons. Not many, not lavish, but enough to make Emma's eyes light up every time she looked around. This was Emma's first real birthday party in 2 years. Last year, her birthday had passed in a corner of a park, with half a sandwich Scarlett had managed to save, and a promise that next year would be different. Next year had arrived, and it truly was different, in a way Scarlett had never dared to imagine. The 3-tier pink cake with sugar butterflies sat proudly in the center of the table. 7 small candles were lined up on top, their flames shimmering and dancing in the room's warm light. Marcus sat at the head of the table. Tony stood with his arms crossed in the corner as usual, and Rosa wiped her hands on her apron, eyes wet as she looked at the scene in front of her. Scarlett sat beside Emma, holding her daughter's hand, her heart beating fast. "All right, sweetheart," Scarlett said softly. "Blow out the candles, and make a really special wish." Emma knelt on her chair, her blue eyes reflecting the firelight from the 7 candles. She clasped her hands against her chest, squeezed her eyes shut tight, and her lips moved as if she were whispering something. Then she opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and blew. All 7 candles went out at once, a thin ribbon of smoke rising to blend into the air. Everyone clapped. Rosa wiped away tears. Scarlett pulled Emma close and kissed the top of her head. Emma beamed, then suddenly turned to look at Marcus. "Uncle Marcus," she called, her voice as clear as glass. "Do you want to know what I wished for?" Marcus tilted his head slightly, a faint smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Tell me." Emma climbed down from the chair and ran around the table to Marcus. She stood in front of him and looked up, her blue eyes as pure as a summer sky. "I wish that you wouldn't be sad anymore," Emma said, her voice serious, as if she were sharing the most important secret in the world. "Your eyes are very sad. I saw it the day you told Mom your story. I pretended to be asleep, but I heard. You cried. I don't want you to cry. I want you to be happy." The room fell silent. Scarlett lifted a hand to cover her mouth, her throat tightening. Rosa turned away, her shoulders trembling. Even Tony, the large man whose face was always as hard as stone, had to look down at the floor. Marcus went still. He stared at the 7-year-old girl standing in front of him, a child he had met less than 2 days ago, yet one who had seen deeper into his soul than anyone had in 12 years. He had built an empire on coldness and cruelty. He had buried grief beneath the shell of power. He had told himself that tears were a luxury a man like him was not allowed to have. But now, in the clear blue gaze of Emma, in a birthday wish she gave to him instead of to herself, every wall he had built suddenly collapsed. Marcus lowered his head, his shoulders began to shake, and for the first time in 12 years, since the night he stood beside Isabella's casket, since the last time he watched Sophia being led away, since the moment he told himself he would never cry again, tears rolled down his cheeks, not the tears of weakness, but the tears of a man finally allowing himself to heal. Emma wasn't afraid. She stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Marcus's neck. "Don't cry anymore, Uncle. I'm here now. My mom is here too. You don't have to be sad all by yourself anymore." Marcus held her tight, his broad shoulders trembling in waves. Scarlett came to his side and placed a hand on his back. She didn't say a word. She simply stayed. And in that moment, under the warm light of the small apartment, surrounded by the scent of cake and the pink balloons, 3 strangers found one another. A 7-year-old girl with a healing wish, a worn-out mother finding hope again, and a mafia boss who, for the first time in more than a decade, felt he might deserve forgiveness. At the same time, across the street, inside a black car parked beneath the shadow of an old oak tree, a man was watching the 3rd-floor apartment. Luca Moretti, 32 years old, with a sharp, gaunt face and eyes as cold as a snake's, lifted a telephoto camera and kept clicking. Through the lens, he saw everything. Pink balloons framed by the window, the outline of a woman with auburn brown hair, a blonde little girl bouncing with excitement, and Marcus Valenti, the most powerful boss in Boston, holding the child as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. Luca lowered the camera, the corner of his mouth curling into a vicious smile. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. The voice on the other end answered after 2 rings. "Report," A rough, low voice said, "Mr. Castellano," Luca said, lowering his voice as if someone might overhear even though he was alone in the car. "I've been following Valenti for 3 days. Like you asked? Something interesting came up. Go on." He picked up 2 strays. A woman and a little girl about 7 years old. They look homeless. He brought them to an apartment on Beacon Hill, the one he's kept empty for years. The line went quiet for a moment. Luca waited, knowing his boss was thinking. Victor Castellano wasn't the type to make rushed decisions. He was 45, his gray hair slicked back, his gaze sharp as a blade. For the past 10 years, he and Marcus Valenti had been in a silent war for control of Boston. 10 years, and neither side had won, because Marcus had never had a weakness Victor could exploit. Until now. "How is he treating them?" Victor asked. "Like family," Luca replied. "Today is the kid's birthday. He bought cake, decorated, threw a party. I got photos of him holding the little one. And Mr. Castellano, I swear to you, I saw him cry." Marcus Valenti cried. Victor laughed, a dry, cold sound. 20 years in this business, and I've never heard anyone say Marcus Valenti has feelings. He's ice. He's a machine. He's a heartless monster. But apparently, he paused, his voice slowing, measured and calculating. Apparently, even a monster can love. Luca looked up at the apartment one more time. Warm yellow light spilled through the window, completely opposite the darkness where he sat. "What do you want me to do next?" "Keep watching," Victor ordered. "Find out who they are, what that woman is to him, whose child that is. I want to know everything. Their schedule, their habits, their weak points, everything." "And then?" Luca asked. "Then," Victor paused, his voice dropping into a hiss like a snake just before it strikes. "Then we'll take the most precious thing Marcus Valenti has. He's been untouchable for too long. At last, he has something to lose." The call ended. Luca shoved the phone into his pocket, started the engine, and drove away slowly, blending into the stream of traffic on the street. He would be back. Tomorrow, the day after, and many days after that. He would record every step Scarlett and Emma took. He would photograph every moment of their happiness. And when the time came, he would help Victor Castellano turn those moments into hell. In the warm apartment on the 3rd floor, Scarlett was cleaning up after the party. Emma was sleeping deeply with a smile on her lips, and Marcus sat by the window, staring out into the night, unaware that the darkness was moving closer than ever. The next 7 days passed like a dream Scarlett didn't dare wake up from. On the first day, she and Emma went to the grocery store with Rosa. Scarlett stood between aisles packed with food, her hands trembling around the shopping basket, not even sure where to begin. For 8 months, she had forgotten what it felt like to choose, to pick something up without silently calculating whether she could afford it. Emma ran down the aisle hugging a cereal box with a rabbit on the front, her eyes shining as she asked if she could get it. And when Scarlett nodded, the little girl squealed with joy as if she'd been handed the whole world. On the second day, Marcus stopped by with a large bag of books. He sat down on the living room rug with Emma, turning each page of picture books, his low, warm voice reading fairy tales out loud. Scarlett stood in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes, but really she was watching them through the crack of the doorway. The image of the most powerful mafia boss in Boston, sitting cross-legged on the floor, patiently explaining to a 7-year-old girl why the princess slept for 100 years, tightened her heart in a strange way. On the 3rd day, Rosa came over to teach Scarlett how to cook traditional Italian pasta, the small kitchen filled with the rich smell of sautéed garlic and tomato sauce. Emma stood on a step stool, kneading dough with her hands, her face dusted with flour, giggling when Rosa told her she had a talent for cooking. Scarlett watched her daughter, watched the older woman patiently guiding every movement, and she realized it was the first time in a long time the kitchen had been filled with laughter from more than one person. It wasn't just the 2 of them alone anymore. On the 4th day, Marcus took them both to the park. Emma ran like the wind toward the swings, her laughter ringing across the green grass. Scarlett sat on a stone bench and watched Marcus push the swing for the little girl, higher, higher, while Emma shouted with delight. There was a moment when the late afternoon sun slanted through the leaves, and Scarlett saw Marcus smile, not the faint, fleeting smile she'd seen before, but a real one, a smile that made the scar on his cheek seem to fade, that made his cold gray eyes turn strangely warm, and she realized her heart was beating faster than normal. On the 5th day, Scarlett woke up to find Marcus already in the kitchen, making coffee for her. He set the mug in front of her, sat down across from her, and they talked, About small things. About the book Emma loved most. About the pasta Scarlett had learned from Rosa. About the weather, the city, things so ordinary. Scarlett almost forgot who the man in front of her was, what he did, how many enemies might be waiting out there in the dark. In that moment, he was just Marcus, and she was just Scarlett, two adults drinking morning coffee like any ordinary couple. On the 6th day, Emma officially started calling him Uncle Marcus. She said it naturally, without hesitation, as if that name had existed for a long time. Uncle Marcus, read to me. Uncle Marcus, can we go to the park again tomorrow? Uncle Marcus, can you stay and eat dinner with me and Mom tonight? Marcus looked at the little girl, then looked at Scarlett as if asking permission. And Scarlett nodded without speaking. But in her heart she knew she wanted him to stay. Not only for Emma, but for herself too. On the 7th day, after dinner, when Emma was asleep, Scarlett and Marcus sat on the small balcony and looked out over the city. They didn't say anything, just stayed quiet together. But the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt warm. It felt safe. It made Scarlett want to believe life could stay like this forever. She glanced at Marcus, at the stern lines of his face under the streetlights, and she wondered when she had started feeling this way. The feeling of wanting to be near him. The sense of calm when he was close. A feeling she didn't dare name, because naming it meant admitting her heart was stirring for a man she knew was dangerous. But that night, when Marcus said goodbye and stepped out the door, Scarlett realized she stood there watching him longer than she needed to. And she knew that no matter how much she tried to deny it, something between them had changed. That night, after leaving Scarlett and Emma's apartment, Marcus returned to his estate in the suburbs of Boston. He sat in his study with a glass of whiskey in his hand, but he didn't drink. He just sat there, staring into empty space, thinking about the past 7 days, thinking about Emma's laughter, thinking about the way Scarlett had looked at him on the balcony tonight, thinking about the strange feeling growing in his chest, the feeling he'd believed had died 12 years ago. The clock chimed 12 times. Midnight. Marcus's phone vibrated on the desk. He picked it up and looked at the screen. A text from an unknown number. No name, no identity. Just a string of digits he didn't recognize. Marcus opened the message and his whole body went rigid. 3 photographs. The first was Emma in the park, sitting on a swing, her blonde hair flying in the wind. The second was Emma standing by the apartment window, reading a book, her face turned slightly in the late afternoon sun. The third was a close-up of her face as she laughed, blue eyes sparkling, dimples clear on her cheeks. The photos had been taken secretly, from a distance, with a professional lens. Whoever took them had been watching, tracking every step, capturing every moment, and Marcus had had no idea. Beneath the 3 photos was a single line of text, only a few short words, but enough to turn the blood in Marcus's veins to ice. She's such a sweet little girl, Marcus. Just like Sophia was back then. Isn't she? It would be a shame if history repeated itself. The whiskey glass slipped from Marcus's hand and shattered across the wooden floor. He didn't hear the glass break. He didn't feel the liquor splashing onto his pant leg. All he could hear was blood roaring in his ears, his heart pounding like war drums, the silent scream of a fear he thought he'd forgotten long ago. Sophia. They mentioned Sophia. They knew about Sophia, and they were threatening to do the same thing to Emma. Marcus stared again at the 3 pictures, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the phone. Emma's face in the photos, her innocent smile, those clear blue eyes with no idea that someone was stalking her, waiting, planning to turn her life into hell. Just like Sophia back then, just like his niece, the 7-year-old who had been torn from him and thrown into the cold system of foster care. The child he had lost, searched for 12 years without success. Not this time. This time, no. Marcus dialed Tony. The other end answered before the first ring had even finished. Boss. Tony's voice was still thick with sleep, but it sharpened instantly when he heard Marcus speak. Code red, Marcus said, his voice cold as steel, but trembling at the very end. Call everyone in. I want round-the-clock protection on the Beacon Hill apartment, starting right now. What happened? Tony asked, his tone fully serious now. Victor. Marcus spat the name like poison. Victor Castellano. He found them. He sent me pictures of Emma. He threatened to make history repeat itself. There was a single beat of silence on the line. Then Tony spoke, his voice tight as a drawn wire. Understood. I'll have people there in 15 minutes. Do you want to tell her? Marcus closed his eyes and Scarlett's face rose in his mind, her smile tonight on the balcony. the trust in her eyes when she looked at him. 7 days of peace he'd given her and Emma, now about to vanish like smoke. "Not yet," he said after a long moment. "I'll tell her myself." Marcus ended the call and looked out the window. The city of Boston slept beneath the night, but he knew there were men out there in the darkness who weren't sleeping, watching, waiting. And Marcus Valenti, the most powerful boss in this city, felt real fear for the first time in his life. Not fear for himself, but fear for a 7-year-old girl with blue eyes and a smile like an angel. Fear for the auburn-haired woman who had begun to claim a place inside his heart. Fear that this time he would fail again, just like 12 years ago. Marcus arrived at the apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. He didn't call ahead. He didn't warn her. He simply appeared at the door with a face gone pale and eyes full of storm. Scarlett opened it in her pajamas, hair loose and messy, her eyes still heavy with sleep. But the moment she saw Marcus's expression, she was wide awake. "What happened?" she asked, worry sharpening her voice. "Why are you here at this hour?" Marcus stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He didn't speak. He only handed her his phone. Scarlett took it, looked at the screen, and it felt as if the world collapsed beneath her feet. 3 photos of Emma, her daughter, the child she had sacrificed everything to protect, taken in secret, watched, followed, and the line of text beneath, those cold letters lined up like a blade, drove straight through her heart. It would be a shame if history repeated itself. The phone slipped from Scarlett's hand. She stumbled back until her spine hit the wall, her legs shaking so hard she could barely stay upright. "No," she whispered, the sound like the moan of a wounded animal. "No, no, no, Scarlett." Marcus moved closer, his voice trying to stay calm, but Scarlett could hear the tension underneath. "You need to breathe. You need to stay calm." "Calm," Scarlett snapped, her voice rising into a thin, panicked edge. "You're telling me to stay calm. Someone is stalking my daughter. Someone is threatening my child's life. And you're telling me to stay calm." She shoved Marcus away and rushed into Emma's room. Emma was still sleeping deeply, clutching her teddy bear, her face peaceful as an angel. Scarlett looked at her and tears poured down. She wanted to scoop her up right then, to carry her and run, to run from this apartment, from this city, from everything. "We have to go." Scarlett turned back, her voice fierce. "Right now, I'm taking Emma and leaving. We've lived on the streets before. We can start over." "Where would you even go?" Marcus asked, his voice not loud, but heavy enough to stop her in place. "He's already seen your face. He's seen Emma's face. He has people everywhere. You think you can run from a mafia boss with a 7-year-old child. You think you can be invisible in broad daylight. Then what do you want me to do?" Scarlett hissed, fighting to keep her voice down so she wouldn't wake Emma. "Sit here and wait to die. Wait for him to come take my little girl. Stay with me," Marcus said, his tone final. "That's the only way. I have men. I have guns. I have the ability to protect you both. Running only makes you and Emma easier targets. But with me, Victor will have to face my entire force if he wants to lay a finger on either of you." Scarlett stared at Marcus, and in that moment everything she'd held inside for 7 days exploded. Gratitude, trust, the fluttering feeling she'd been terrified to name. All of it drowned beneath a wave of anger and fear. "This is your fault," she said, her voice shaking, bitter and sharp. "If you hadn't shown up at that bakery that day, if you hadn't brought us here, if you hadn't made us part of your life, none of this would be happening. My daughter wouldn't be threatened. We might have been poor, we might have been homeless, but we were safe. And now you've put my little girl in the crosshairs of killers." Marcus didn't speak. He stood there and took every accusation like a knife to the chest. Because she was right. It was all his fault. He had wanted to redeem the past, to make up for Isabella and Sophia, and instead he had dragged an innocent mother and child into the dangerous whirlpool of his life. "You're right," Marcus finally said, his voice rough. "This is my fault. I was selfish. I saw you and Emma and I saw a chance to make things right, and I didn't think about the consequences. But Scarlett, no matter how much you hate me, no matter how badly you want me out of your life, right now I'm the only one who can protect you. Give me the chance to fix this. Give me the chance to keep Emma safe. When it's over, if you still want me gone, I'll go. But right now, please, trust me." Scarlett looked at him, tears still streaming down her face. She wanted to scream at him, to throw him out of the apartment, to forget she'd ever felt anything for this man. But she also knew he was right. She had no other choice. In the bedroom, Emma shifted and softly called for her mother in her sleep. And Scarlett knew that for her daughter, she would do anything, even place her trust in the hands of a mafia boss. The very next morning, the Beacon Hill apartment turned into a fortress. Scarlett stood by the window, watching men in black suits move silently throughout the building. 2 guards at the main entrance, 2 on the fire escape stairs, 2 more patrolling the surrounding area. Inside the apartment, Tony directed a crew installing reinforced steel doors, an alarm system, and security cameras on every corner. The sound of drills, hammering, and low, murmured instructions never stopped. Emma sat on the sofa, clutching her teddy bear, her blue eyes wide as she watched everything unfolding around her. She didn't ask questions, but Scarlett knew she was scared. A 7-year-old child didn't need to understand everything to feel the tension in the air. By afternoon, when it was all finished, Marcus called Scarlett into the master bedroom. He closed the door, making sure Emma couldn't hear, and set a small box wrapped in black cloth on the table. Scarlett looked at it, already sensing what was inside, and her stomach tightened. Marcus opened the box. Inside was a small, compact handgun, sized to fit a woman's hand. The cold black metal caught the light, looking both unfamiliar and terrifying in Scarlett's eyes. "I hope you never have to use it," Marcus said, his voice low and serious. "But if something happens, if they get past my men, if I'm not there, then you need something to defend yourself." Scarlett shook her head and stepped back. "I don't know how to use a gun. I'm a nurse. I was trained to save people, not to hurt anyone." "I know," Marcus said softly. He picked up the gun, checked the safety, then held it out to her. "And that's why I'm going to teach you right now." Over the next minutes, Marcus walked Scarlett through every step: how to hold it firmly, how to remove and insert the magazine, how to aim, how to squeeze the trigger, how to control the kick. Scarlett followed along, her hands shaking, sweat beading on her forehead. The cold metal in her palm made her feel sick, but she forced it down. "For Emma," she reminded herself. "For my daughter, I'll do anything. How do you feel?" Marcus asked after she finished the last practice. "Horrible," Scarlett said honestly. "I hate this feeling. I hate that I have to hold this thing." "Good," Marcus nodded. "Hating it is right. But if someone breaks in here, if he comes toward Emma, you won't have time to think. Instinct will take over, the instinct of a mother protecting her child. Trust me. When that moment comes, you'll know what to do." Scarlett looked at the gun in her hand, then at Marcus. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him, because if she didn't, she would fall apart. She put the gun in the bedside drawer, exactly where Marcus told her to place it, where she could reach it within 3 seconds if needed. Then she stepped back into the living room, trying to pull a normal smile onto her face when she saw Emma. But the little girl had been waiting, blue eyes fixed on her mother with worry. "Mom," Emma said, her voice small as breath, "is there a bad person who wants to hurt us?" Scarlett's heart felt squeezed shut. She knelt down and took Emma's tiny hands in hers. "What makes you think that? I saw the men in black. I saw them put in the new door. I saw Uncle Marcus talk to you in the room. And Mom," Emma hesitated, "your eyes look scared. Like when we were on the street, when strangers came close to us at night." Scarlett pulled her into a tight embrace, fighting back tears. She had forgotten that Emma was small, but she had already lived through too much. She knew how to sense danger. She could read adult faces. She had grown up too fast during those 8 months on the streets. "Uncle Marcus is protecting us," Scarlett whispered into her daughter's hair. "He's very strong. He won't let anyone hurt you. And neither will I. I'll protect you no matter what. Do you trust me?" Emma nodded and wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "I trust you. And I trust Uncle Marcus too. He won't let anyone hurt us." Scarlett closed her eyes and held her daughter tighter. In her mind, she saw the gun in the drawer. She hoped she would never have to use it. But if she did, for Emma, she would pull the trigger without hesitation. At the same time, about 5 miles south of the Beacon Hill apartment, in the basement room of an old, worn Italian restaurant in Southie, Victor Castellano was presiding over a meeting. 15 men sat around a long wooden table, their faces half swallowed by shadow, with only the dull yellow light from a hanging ceiling lamp spilling down. Cigarette smoke curled through the thick air, heavy with the smell of whiskey and tension. Victor stood at the head of the table, holding a stack of photographs. He was 45 years old, his gray hair slicked neatly back, an expensive gray suit on his frame, eyes cold as ice. When he spoke, the entire room went silent. Marcus Valenti thinks he can protect them. Victor threw the stack of photos onto the table. Pictures of Scarlett and Emma scattered across the wood. Some taken in the park, some through the apartment window, some while they were at the grocery store. He reinforced the apartment, posted 6 guards, installed cameras everywhere. He thinks that's enough to stop us. Luca, seated to Victor's right, spoke up. 6 men isn't nothing, boss, and the apartment is on the 3rd floor, with only 1 main staircase and 1 fire escape. It won't be easy to get in. Victor laughed, a dry sound with no humor in it. 6 men. I have 15, and I have something Marcus doesn't. He pointed to a map of the building spread across the center of the table, strategic positions marked in red ink, the element of surprise. He's defending, which means he's waiting. But waiting for what? Waiting how long? A day? A week? A month? His men will get tired. They'll get sloppy. They'll let their guard down. And that's when we strike. Victor circled a spot on the map. 3 in the morning. Tomorrow night, the hour when people sleep the deepest. The hour when reflexes are slowest. The hour when even the most professional guards struggle to stay sharp. A young gunman at the far end of the table spoke. What's the target? Kill Valenti. Victor shook his head slowly, a vicious smile spreading across his mouth. No, killing Marcus is too easy, too quick, too merciful. I want him to suffer. I want him to watch the thing he treasures most get ripped from his hands. I want him to live in hell before I send him to real hell. The target is to take the woman and the child alive. Luca raised an eyebrow. And then what? Victor looked at the photo of Emma smiling, and his finger stroked lightly over the little girl's face in the picture. Then I'll send Marcus a gift, piece by piece, until he drops to his knees and begs, until he hands over all his territory, until he has nothing left but pain and regret. The room stayed silent. A few men exchanged uneasy looks. They were killers, cold-blooded gunmen, but even they felt a chill at the cruelty in Victor's voice. Any questions? Victor asked, sweeping his gaze around the table. No one spoke. Good. Victor nodded and straightened. 3 in the morning. Tomorrow night. 15 men, divided into 3 groups. Group 1 cuts the power and handles the cameras. Group 2 deals with the guards outside. Group 3 breaches the apartment and brings the targets out. Fast, clean, no traces left behind. He looked down at Emma's photo once more, his cold eyes holding not a shred of mercy. Tomorrow night, Marcus Valenti will learn the most important lesson of his life. In this world, having a weakness means you can be destroyed. And he just exposed the biggest weakness he has. That night, Marcus decided to stay at the apartment. He sat in an armchair in the living room, his eyes never leaving the front door, his hand resting on the gun in his lap. Tony stood guard in the hallway outside with 2 other men. 4 more were positioned on the ground floor and around the building. Scarlett and Emma slept in the bedroom. The door left slightly open so Marcus could hear any movement. The apartment was so quiet you could hear the wall clock ticking. 2:55 in the morning. Marcus glanced at the time, a restless unease crawling under his skin. Something wasn't right. The air felt too still, too normal, as if a storm were gathering strength before it broke. He reached for his radio to call Tony and check the perimeter. And at that exact moment, the lights went out. The entire apartment fell into darkness. Then the gunfire started. Not one shot, but a rapid series of blasts from downstairs, tearing through the silent night. Screams, running footsteps, shattering glass. Marcus sprang up, the fighting instinct honed over 20 years in the life snapping into place. He rushed to the bedroom and kicked the door open. Scarlett was already awake, sitting up in bed with Emma clutched tight in her arms, eyes wide in the dark. "Bathroom!" Marcus shouted, his voice urgent and hard. "Get Emma into the bathroom. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone unless you hear my voice." Scarlett didn't ask. She didn't hesitate. She scooped Emma up and ran to the bathroom, the one Marcus had reinforced with a steel door and a special deadbolt. Emma cried, her sobs swallowed by the chaos outside. "Mom, I'm scared. I'm here. I'm here with you." Scarlett shoved Emma into the corner of the bathroom and used her own body as a shield. She reached to lock the door, her heart pounding like it might burst through her ribs. Outside, Marcus ran toward the front door just as Tony stumbled in, his left hand clamped over his right shoulder, blood pouring through his fingers. "There are too many, boss," Tony shouted, his face twisted with pain. "At least 15. The two guys on the stairs are dead. They're coming up. Marcus yanked Tony inside, slammed the steel door shut, and threw the lock. How long will this hold? Tony asked, breathing hard. 5 minutes. Maybe 10 at most. They've got breaching equipment. 5 minutes. Marcus ground his teeth. 5 minutes to protect the two most precious lives he had. 5 minutes to face 15 gunmen. 5 minutes balanced between life and death. Did you call for backup? Marcus asked. Marco's on the way. Tony winced, pressing his back to the wall, blood soaking his shirt red. 20 minutes and he'll be here. 20 minutes. They didn't have 20 minutes. The pounding on the door began, heavy and steady, like the heartbeat of death itself. Then the drill bit into metal, sparks flying as they cut through the lock. Marcus checked his gun and counted his rounds. 12 bullets. He scanned the apartment for the best defensive position. Get behind the sofa and shoot anything that comes through that door, he ordered Tony. I'll hold them in the hallway to the bedroom. No matter what, don't let them get near the bathroom. Tony nodded and drew his gun with his uninjured hand. Understood, boss. Marcus ran to the hallway and took cover behind the corner of the wall. From there, he could see both the front door and the bathroom door where Scarlett and Emma were hiding. He wouldn't let anyone past him, even if it killed him. The steel door blew open after 3 minutes. Blinding flashlight beams swept across the room, followed by dark figures moving fast and professional. Tony fired first, dropping one man right in the doorway. But there were too many. They poured in like a tide, spreading through the living room, overturning furniture, kicking open doors. Marcus shot down 2 men trying to push into the hallway, but the third bullet grazed his shoulder, leaving a burning line of pain. He had no time to think about the wound. He only thought about Emma, about Scarlett, about the fragile bathroom door behind him, about the promise he had made the moment he brought them here. That he would protect them, that he wouldn't let history repeat itself, that this time he would not fail. Another man lunged into the hallway, and Marcus shot him in the chest. The next one went down just outside the bedroom door, but his ammunition was running low, and there were still far too many enemies. In the bathroom, Scarlett heard the gunshots, the shouting, the pounding footsteps, and the crash of things being thrown aside. Emma pressed her face into her mother's chest, crying without sound. And Scarlett knew that if they got past Marcus, she would be the last line of defense. The gunfire outside began to thin out. Scarlett didn't know whether that meant Marcus was winning or losing. She only knew that every second inside this cramped bathroom stretched into a century. Emma pressed herself into the corner, blue eyes soaked with tears, as she looked at her mother in absolute terror. She wasn't crying out loud anymore, just trembling, the sobs trapped in her throat. Scarlett knelt in front of her, both hands gripping Emma's shoulders. Listen to me, she whispered, her voice shaking but forcing itself steady. No matter what happens, you stay right here. You don't go outside. You don't make a sound. Do you understand? Emma nodded, her lips pressed so tight they'd gone pale. Scarlett kissed her forehead, then stood and turned toward the door. She remembered the gun Marcus had given her, the gun he'd taught her how to use, the gun she'd put in the bedside drawer in the bedroom, outside this bathroom. Scarlett's heart sank. She didn't have it. She'd forgotten to grab it when Marcus shouted for her to run in here. She'd only thought about protecting Emma, about running, and she'd forgotten the one weapon that might save them. And then heavy footsteps sounded right outside the bathroom door, then a strange man's voice, thick with menace. They're in here. I found them. Scarlett went rigid. She heard the pounding on the door, metal striking metal, a drill screaming into the hinges. They were breaking in. They'd get through in a few minutes, and she had nothing in her hands to fight back. Mom, Emma whispered behind her, her voice broken. Scarlett turned and looked at her daughter, at that small face gone white with fear, at those blue eyes begging her to do something. And in that moment, something inside Scarlett ignited. Not despair, not surrender. Rage. The rage of a mother with nothing left to lose. She scanned the bathroom, hunting for anything she could use as a weapon. Her gaze locked on the large mirror on the wall. She grabbed the edge and yanked. The mirror crashed down and shattered across the floor. Scarlett bent, seized the biggest shard, sharp as a blade. The glass bit into her palm and blood welled, but she didn't feel pain. She only felt resolve. The steel door burst open. A large man stepped inside, his face half covered by a black mask, a gun in his hand. He saw Scarlett standing in front of Emma, the mirror shard in her grip, blood running down her arm, and he laughed, a sneer of pure contempt. "What do you think you're going to do with that?" he asked, lifting the gun and aiming it straight at Scarlett. "Put it down and step aside. I've got no business with you. I only need the kid." Scarlett didn't move. She stood there, the shard clenched tight, her body the only wall between the predator and her child. She knew she couldn't win. A piece of glass against a gun, a homeless nurse against a professional killer, but she wouldn't step aside, even if it meant dying. "I said it already." His voice turned impatient. "Step aside. Don't make me do something I don't want to do." Scarlett looked him straight in the eye, her voice trembling but every word landing clear. "If you want my daughter, you'll have to step over my dead body first." The intruder raised an eyebrow, surprised by her stubbornness. He moved one step closer, the gun still trained on her. "Who do you think you are?" he asked, his tone flat and cold. "What do you think you can do?" Scarlett drew a deep breath. In her mind, the past months flashed like a speeding film. Freezing nights on the streets, meals she'd skipped so Emma could have one more bite, the times she'd pretended to be strong while she was breaking inside. Every sacrifice, every tear, every night she'd stayed awake worrying over her child. All of it led to this moment. "I'm this child's mother," Scarlett said, and her voice didn't shake anymore. "That's all I need to be." The intruder laughed and strode forward to rip Emma from the corner. He didn't see Scarlett as a threat. He thought she was just a weak woman holding a useless shard of glass. That was his last mistake. The instant he passed her, Scarlett didn't think. She didn't hesitate. She drove the shard into his throat with all her strength, with all the fury of a mother protecting her child. He screamed, twisting back, the gun coming up. But Scarlett was already on him, wrestling the weapon away, and in that violent blur her finger found the trigger. She squeezed. The shot exploded inside the small room, deafening. The intruder collapsed to the floor and didn't move. Scarlett stood there, the gun smoking in her hand, her whole body shaking. She looked down at the man at her feet, then back at Emma crumpled in the corner. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice raw. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face, and Scarlett knew that even though she had just taken a life, she didn't regret it at all. Because it was the choice of a mother. The gunshot from the bathroom froze Marcus for a split second. His heart felt like it stopped. No, not this. He spun around, leaving the enemy pressing in behind him, with only one thought in his head. Emma. Scarlett. He lunged for the bathroom, kicked through the broken door, and the sight in front of him hit like both relief and pain. Scarlett stood there with the gun in her hand, shaking from head to toe, blood from the cut in her palm dripping onto the floor. At her feet lay the intruder's body, and in the corner, Emma sat curled up, eyes wide, staring at her mother in horror. "She's okay," Marcus exhaled, his voice rough. She did it, but he didn't have time to feel relief for long. Footsteps behind him reminded him the fight wasn't over. He turned, gun up, facing the last man charging into the hallway. One shot, the man went down, and then silence. Silence so sudden Scarlett thought she had gone deaf. She stood there, not daring to move, not daring to believe it was over. Not until the wail of sirens rose outside, not until heavy steps thundered up the stairs, not until Tony's familiar voice shouted from the living room. "Boss, backup's here. We've got it under control." Marcus didn't answer. He stepped into the bathroom and gently took the gun from Scarlett's hand. She looked at him, her blue eyes empty, as if her soul had left her body. "I killed someone," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I killed a man." "You saved your daughter," Marcus said, his tone gentle but firm. "You did the right thing." Scarlett looked down at her hand, the hand still smeared with blood, the hand that had just pulled a trigger. Then she looked at Emma, still curled in the corner, and something inside her shattered. She cried. Not the quiet tears from before, but the sobbing, broken cry of a woman who had endured too much. A cry of fear, of release, of exhaustion. Marcus stepped forward and wrapped her in his arms. He didn't say a word. He just let her cry, let her spill everything she had been holding back. Emma stood, ran to them, and wedged herself between the two adults, her small arms wrapping around both her mother and Marcus at the same time. The three of them stood there in the ruined bathroom, surrounded by the smell of gunpowder and blood, holding each other as if it were the only thing keeping them from breaking apart. Outside, dawn was rising. The first light of the new day slipped through the shattered window and fell across the wrecked apartment. Tony appeared in the bathroom doorway, his shoulder still roughly bandaged, his face tired but carrying good news. "We caught Victor," he reported. He was in the command car outside, waiting for updates. Our men took him down. Marcus lifted his head and looked at Tony. His gaze wasn't cold anymore. In those gray eyes was relief, gratitude, something Tony had never seen in his boss in 20 years. "Handle him our way," Marcus said, his voice worn out. "But not today. Today I need to be with them." Tony nodded, backed away, and closed the door. Marcus looked down at Scarlett and Emma in his arms. Scarlett had stopped crying, her head resting against his chest, her breathing gradually evening out. Emma had fallen asleep, drained after the terror of the night, tear tracks still on her face. And Marcus, the most powerful mafia boss in Boston, the man who hadn't cried in 12 years, felt hot tears rolling down his cheeks. He wasn't crying from pain. He wasn't crying from fear. He was crying because for the first time in his life, he had something worth protecting, and he hadn't failed. He cried for Isabella, for Sophia, for all the losses he had carried for more than a decade. He cried because Scarlett had trusted him, because Emma had called him Uncle Marcus, because they had walked through hell and survived. He held the two of them tighter, let the tears fall freely, and whispered a promise only the dawn could hear. "I will never let anyone hurt you again, no matter what it costs." 6 months passed like a dream Scarlett was no longer afraid to wake up from. After that horrific night, Marcus moved her and Emma to a new house in a quiet Boston suburb, with a white fence, a yard shaded by trees, and birdsong every morning. No more apartment marked by bullets and blood. No more memories of gunshots in the night. Only peace, the kind Scarlett had believed she would never taste. She went back to work as a nurse at a small clinic, 15 minutes from the house. Marcus helped her restore her credentials, untangle the legal problems from the debt Ryan had left behind, and open the door for her to step into a new life. On her first day back at work, Scarlett stood in front of the mirror, stared at the familiar nurse's uniform, and cried. Not because she was sad, but because she realized she was still herself. Still Scarlett Morgan, the woman who wanted to heal and help other people. 8 months of homelessness hadn't taken that away. The night of terror hadn't taken that away. She was still here, stronger than ever. Emma started school at an elementary school near their home. On the first day, she clung to her mother's hand at the school gate, blue eyes anxious as she watched unfamiliar children run and play across the yard. But after only a week, Emma had friends. She brought home messy little drawings and told stories about her kind teacher, about Lily who sat next to her and always lent her colored pencils, about cafeteria lunches and the pizza she loved most. Scarlett listened to her every evening, and she realized these were the simplest things she had dreamed of for her daughter through those 8 months on the streets. A school, friends, a normal childhood. Marcus visited them every weekend. He brought pastries from Rosetti's bakery, new books for Emma, and sometimes flowers for Scarlett. They ate dinner together, talked about ordinary things, laughed like a real family. Scarlett didn't know what to call what existed between her and Marcus. It wasn't love, at least not yet. But it wasn't only gratitude either. It was something deeper, an invisible thread connecting two people who had made it through hell together. But what made Scarlett happiest wasn't her new life. It was the news Marcus brought one evening last month. He sat across from her in the living room, his face carrying an emotion she rarely saw. "I found Sophia," he said, his voice rough. "My niece. I found her." Scarlett stared at him, her heart racing. "Where is she? How is she?" Marcus smiled, a rare smile edged with tears. "Sophia is 19 now. She's a college sophomore, majoring in psychology. She lives in California. A good family adopted her when she was 10. She's healthy, smart, and beautiful, just like Isabella." He paused and drew in a deep breath. "I contacted her. At first she didn't want to meet me. She knows who I am, what I do. She was afraid, but then she agreed to talk on the phone. We talked for 3 hours. She told me about her mother, about the few memories she still has, and she said she'll think about meeting me." Scarlett reached for Marcus's hand, her eyes burning. "That's a wonderful beginning." Marcus nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. 12 years. 12 years I searched for her. And finally, I heard her voice. Finally, I know she's okay. Whether she forgives me or not, whether she ever wants to see me or not, just knowing she's happy is enough. Scarlett looked at the man in front of her, the powerful mafia boss crying like a child because he had found his niece, and she realized this was the real Marcus Valenti, not the ruthless figure on the news, not the cold boss the whole city feared, but a man who had carried a wound for more than a decade, and who was finally, at last, beginning to heal. 1 year after that fateful day in the bakery, Scarlett pushed open the familiar door of Rosetti's bakery, the little bell chiming like a welcome. Emma ran in first, blonde hair tied high with a brand new pink ribbon, clean white sneakers tapping a rhythm on the wooden floor. She was no longer the little girl with worn-out shoes and the sad eyes of a year ago. Now Emma was 8 years old, healthy, happy, and eagerly staring into the glass cake case, as if it held an entire magical universe. Marcus came in last, his hand resting lightly on Scarlett's back. He wore a dark blue shirt, no suit, none of the intimidating presence of a mafia boss. Just a man smiling as he watched a blonde little girl point at every cake and ask a dozen questions. The bakery still looked the same. The warm scent of sugar still hung in the air. The oven still hummed in the back. But something was different. Brittany, the employee from last year, had quit long ago. Behind the counter now stood a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, greeting them like honored guests. They chose the table in the corner, the very spot where Marcus had sat a year earlier when he first saw the two of them. The birthday cake was brought out, 3 tiers of pink frosting with sugar butterflies. Exactly like last year's cake, but this time there were 8 candles glowing on top. Emma sat between Scarlett and Marcus, blue eyes sparkling with candlelight. Rosa sat across from them, a tissue already in her hand, ready to wipe away tears. Tony stood in the corner as usual, but there was a rare smile on his mouth. And beside Tony, a young woman with dark hair watched the scene with emotion in her face. Sophia, Marcus's niece, had flown in from California to attend Emma's birthday. She had met Marcus for the first time 2 months ago, and even though their relationship was still slowly mending, she had agreed to become part of this new family. "All right, sweetheart," Scarlett said gently. "Blow out the candles and make a really special wish." Emma closed her eyes and clasped her hands against her chest. She held that pose for a few seconds, then opened her eyes and shook her head. "I don't need to wish for anything," Emma said, her clear voice carrying through the bakery. "All my wishes already came true." Scarlett felt tears rush up. She remembered a year ago, standing at the register with her head bowed, asking for a cake that was about to expire for her daughter. She remembered the humiliation, the desperation, the helplessness of a mother who couldn't give her child even a simple birthday celebration. And now her daughter was sitting here saying every wish had come true. Emma drew a deep breath and blew out all 8 candles. Everyone clapped. Rosa cried. Sophia smiled. And Marcus looked at the little girl with eyes gone red, with the love of a father he had never believed he would become. Emma stood and wrapped her arms around Scarlett's neck, then pulled Marcus into her small embrace too. She held them both tight, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, her hand gripping Marcus's shirt. "I love my family," Emma whispered. "Thank you, Mom, for always protecting me. Thank you, Uncle Marcus, for giving us a home. I'm the happiest kid in the world." Marcus held the two of them close and didn't speak, letting his tears fall quietly. He thought of Isabella, the sister he had lost. He thought of Sophia, the niece he had found again. And he thought of Scarlett and Emma, 2 people who had walked into his life a year ago and changed everything. He had searched for redemption for 12 years, and at last, he found it. Not in power or money, but in the laughter of an 8-year-old girl, in the eyes of a woman with auburn brown hair, in a birthday cake with 8 candles in a small bakery in South Boston. Sometimes the best things in life begin in the most desperate moments. A mother asking for an expired cake for her daughter. A mafia boss carrying a wound that had not healed for 12 years. A 7-year-old girl with worn-out sneakers and a simple wish. They found one another in that small bakery, and they saved one another. Not with money, not with power, but with the simplest, strongest, and most precious thing in this world. Love. This story reminds us that even when life pushes us into a dead end, even when we think we've lost everything, there is still hope. There are still kind hearts willing to help. And sometimes miracles come from the places we least expect. If this story moved you, please hit the like button to support our channel. Share this video with the people you love to spread the message of love and hope. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss heart-touching stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Did it make you think of anything in real life? Share your feelings in the comments below. We would truly love to hear what's on your heart. Thank you for staying until the end of the story. Wishing you and your family good health, a joyful life, and days filled with love and peace. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.